Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to start by looking at an object. So I just want you to, for a second, picture it in your mind.
Okay.
It's a stack of paper, but it's not, A4 printer paper. It's not from a fancy notebook. It's certainly not parchment.
No.
It's a stack of rough, industrial-grade toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
And written on this toilet paper in this tiny, cramped handwriting is a masterpiece of world literature.
And it's not just a masterpiece in the artistic sense of the word. This stack of toilet paper is a weapon.
Right.
It's a manifesto. It represents a man deciding that even if you lock him in a cage, even if you take his name away, and even if you strip him of every last shred of his dignity, he is going to speak.
We are, of course, talking about the life and the incredible legacy of Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. We lost him very recently, May 28th, 2025, to be exact.
So recent.
And all the obituaries, they called him a literary titan. But I feel like those words, they're almost too clean. They're too polished.
I agree completely.
They don't capture the dirt and the danger and just the sheer audacity of what this man's life was.
I think you're right. Titan makes him sound like a statue, something cold and made of marble. But when you look at the source material we have in front of us today, the comprehensive biography covering nearly 9 decades, his prison diaries, his philosophical essays,
the whole
picture. And you realize his life was messy, it was violent, and it was so incredibly human. This is not a story about some guy sitting in an ivory tower writing pretty sentences.
No, this is a story about a man who turned language itself into a battlefield.
Yes.
And that really is our mission for this deep dive. We want to understand how a boy who was born into the British Empire, who was given the name James, transformed himself into Ngũgĩ, a man who ended up on the shortlist for the Nobel Prize basically every year for 2 decades.
And maybe more importantly, why he decided that writing in English, the very language that had made him world famous, was actually an act of betrayal.
That's it. That's the central conflict.
The war between English and Gikuyu. It sounds so academic when you say it like that, but for him, it was absolutely life or death.
So let's go back. We have to go back to the beginning to really get this. Let's set the scene. The year is 1938. The place is Kamiriithu, in what was then called the Kenya colony. And Ngũgĩ enters the world, but he's not exactly coming into a small, quiet family, is he?
No, not at all. This is one of those facts that just floors you immediately when you start reading about him. He was born James Ngũgĩ. His father, Thiong'o wa Duka, had 4 wives.
4
wives.
Yeah.
Ngũgĩ was the son of the 3rd wife, Wanjiku.
Yeah.
In total, there were 28 children.
28. Just pause on the logistics of that for a second. The dinner table, the sleeping arrangements. How do you even keep track of everyone's names?
It's a village within a village. It really is. But we have to look past just the shocking number. This family structure tells us something absolutely crucial about the agrarian society he was born into. It was a society that was deeply, fundamentally connected to the land. Everything revolved around the soil.
Yeah.
But, and this is the big but that hangs over his entire childhood, he was born in 1938.
Right in the thick of the colonial squeeze.
Precisely. The sources we have really dig into this piece of legislation, the British Imperial Land Act of 1915.
Which sounds incredibly boring and bureaucratic.
It sounds like something you'd skim past in a history textbook.
Mm-hmm.
But what it actually meant on the ground for a family like Ngũgĩ's, it was catastrophic.
How so?
It wasn't just paper. This act declared that all land in Kenya essentially belonged to the British Crown. It legally turned native Kenyans into tenants at the will of the Crown.
On their own ancestral land.
On the land their families had farmed for generations. So Ngũgĩ is born into this family that is historically agrarian. Their entire identity is defined by their relationship to the soil, but that very soil is being legally stolen right out from under their feet.
They're sharecroppers in their own home.
That's exactly what they were. The tension is baked in from day one. He is born into a world that is already shrinking, already being taken away.
And then when he's just a teenager, that shrinking world it explodes.
It explodes. We're talking about the Mau Mau uprising.
1952 to 1960.
Right. And, history books often summarize the Mau Mau as an armed rebellion, which is true, but that phrase is too neat.
Too clinical.
It is. We need to understand the texture of this conflict. This wasn't 2 formal armies meeting on a battlefield. This was a dirty, terrifying psychological war. It was happening in the forests, it was happening in the villages, it was happening inside people's homes.
And for Ngũgĩ, a young boy at the time, this wasn't something he was reading about in the newspaper.
No, it was in his living room. literally.
Tell us about that. The personal toll on his family was immense.
It was. His older brother, Ngũgĩ, a man he looked up to, joined the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, the Mau Mau. He went into the forests to fight, and he was eventually killed. Another brother was shot and wounded during the state of emergency. But the detail from the biography that always haunts me is about his mother.
Wanjiku.
Yes. She was arrested and taken to a home guard post. Now, the home guards were local Kenyans who collaborated with the British. And this is so important. It pitted neighbor against neighbor, cousin against cousin.
It tore the fabric of the community apart.
Completely. And at this post, she was tortured. The sources are clear on this. She was beaten, she was interrogated. They wanted her to betray her sons, to tell them where the fighters were hiding, and she refused.
The strength that must have taken.
Unimaginable. So you have to put yourself in young Njigi's shoes. This is his reality. His brother is being hunted in the forest. His mother is being tortured by their neighbors. His home is a war zone. And while all of this is happening, where is he?
This is the great paradox of his early life. He's at school.
He's at school.
Yeah.
And not just any school. In 1955, he gets accepted into Alliance High School.
Which was the school.
It was the prestigious institution for Africans in Kenya. But, and this is the key, it was modeled entirely on the British public school system. Think cricket, Shakespeare, Christian hymns, the whole 9 yards.
So just try to picture this. You have a teenager, he's wearing a crisp school uniform, he's learning the rules of cricket, he's reading Shakespeare, reciting English poetry.
And a few miles away, his family is being destroyed by the very system that is educating him.
The cognitive dissonance must have been deafening.
It's almost impossible to comprehend. And there is this one specific visual memory he wrote about later in his life that just crystallizes the whole thing.
What was that?
He finished his first term at Alliance, this pristine bubble of colonial order and discipline, and he walked home to his village, Limuru. He was expecting to see his house, the family compound, everything he knew, and it was gone. Just gone. The British forces had razed the entire village to the ground.
The whole village?
The whole thing. It was part of this collective punishment strategy they had. They would just burn everything down to cut off any possible supply lines to the Mau fighters in the forest. So he's just standing there, a schoolboy, his head full of English grammar and Christian theology, looking at a pile of ash where his home used to be.
Wow. That's a moment that would forge anyone's consciousness. He wrote about it later, something like, "By losing my home, I became more aware of it."
Yes. It's almost like the trauma forced him to see things with this intense, unbearable clarity.
And that clarity, that way of seeing, it followed him when he left Kenya for the first time.
It did. In 1959, he goes to Maker University in Uganda. He calls this his educational migration. And honestly, you have to understand, Maker in the early 60s, that was the place to be.
It sounds like it was the intellectual capital of East Africa.
Of the continent, really. People have compared it to the Harlem Renaissance. He had all these brilliant minds converging from all over Africa. It was just this hotbed of political thought, literary debate, post-colonial dreaming. The air must have been electric.
And it's here, in 1962, that we get one of those moments that, if you love literature, you just wish you could have been a fly on the wall for.
The African Writers' Conference.
And this is where he meets Chinua Achebe.
The giant himself. I mean, Achebe had already published Things Fall Apart a few years earlier. He was a global celebrity.
And Ngũgĩ was just a student named James. Nobody.
A nobody.
Yeah.
But he had these manuscripts, these stories he'd been working on. And he works up the courage, and you just have to imagine the nerves to approach Achebe.
Just walking up to him. "Excuse me, Mr. Achebe, I know you're very busy, but would you mind just looking at my scribblings?"
Something like that. And what's amazing is that Achebe didn't brush him off. He could have. He was a busy, famous man. But he took the manuscripts. He read what would eventually become Weep Not Child, and he was blown away. He saw the genius in it immediately. He sent it directly to his own publisher, Heinemann, in London. And in 1964, Weep Not Child is published.
And we should clarify for our listeners, this wasn't just, a new book came out. This was a historic event.
It was a landmark. It was the first novel in English ever to be published by a writer from East Africa. He literally broke the seal.
He opened the door for everyone else.
And he didn't stop. He followed it up almost immediately with The River Between in 1965.
I remember reading The River Between in college. It's this beautiful, tragic story. It's almost like a Romeo and Juliet, right? A boy from a Christian convert family falls for the daughter of a traditionalist leader.
That's the core conflict. It's all about that cultural rift caused by colonization. It deals with female circumcision, with religion, with tradition versus modernity. It's a stunning book.
And it made him a star.
An absolute star. He was
Yeah.
put on the official school syllabus in Kenya. Can you imagine? The boy whose village was burned down by the state is now required reading for the state schools. He was the golden boy of African literature.
So by the mid-60s, he's on top of the world. He's James Ngũgĩ, the celebrated author. He wins a scholarship to go to the University of Leeds in England. He's going to the heart of the empire.
You'd think he'd just settle into a comfortable life as an academic, a celebrated post-colonial writer.
You would think. But Leeds is where that comfortable James identity starts to crack. He goes there to study, but he ends up getting radicalized. What happened in Leeds? Was it just the rainy English weather?
The weather probably didn't help, no. But it was the intellectual climate. He started reading Frantz Fanon. Specifically, he read The Wretched of the Earth.
And for anyone listening who hasn't read Fanon, can you just explain why that book is so explosive?
Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique who ended up joining the Algerian Revolution against the French. And his work is it's searing. He argued that colonization isn't just about stealing land or resources, it's a psychological disease.
A disease.
Yes. It forces the colonized person to hate themselves, to see themselves through the eyes of the colonizer, to internalize their own inferiority. And Fanon argued that true liberation requires a violent rupture, a complete, total rejection of the colonizer's values and language.
That must have hit Ngũgĩ like a ton of bricks. Here he is, the perfect product of colonial education, reading a book that tells him his entire education is actually a form of enslavement.
Precisely. The biography notes he was supposed to be writing his thesis on Caribbean literature. He just abandoned it. He couldn't do it anymore. He shifted his focus entirely to the work of George Lamming and this concept of peasant revolt.
So his thinking is shifting.
It's a seismic shift. He realizes that literature shouldn't just be about the polite anxieties of the educated elite. It should be about the struggle of the common people, the peasants, the workers.
And this leads us to the crisis of identity. We start to see the first major outward change.
The name. He comes to the conclusion by 1970 that James is a brand. It's the brand of the oppressor. It's a slave name.
So he drops it.
He drops it. He becomes Ngũgĩ Thiong'o, son of Thiong'o, reclaiming his Gikuyu identity.
But he doesn't stop with the name. He goes back to Kenya. He gets a job as a professor at the University of Nairobi, and he immediately decides to pick a fight with the entire academic establishment.
A huge fight.
He wants to abolish the English department.
It's known as the famous Abolition of the English Department memo that he co-wrote. And it caused an absolute firestorm.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because I can just hear the faculty meeting now. Ngũgĩ, be reasonable. English is the global language. It's the language of commerce, of science. If we shut down the English department, aren't we just hurting our own students' futures?
That was exactly the argument made against him. The more conservative faculty members were outraged. They said things like, we need to study Shakespeare and the great tradition to understand the world.
So what was his counter-argument?
His argument was actually very nuanced. He wasn't saying don't read Shakespeare or burn English books. He was asking a much more fundamental question. He was asking about centrality.
Explain that. What's the difference?
Well, think of it like a map of the world. For centuries, the map of literature had London at the very center.
Okay.
And everything else, African literature, Indian literature, Caribbean literature, was out there on the margins.
It was other.
Exactly. Commonwealth literature, or some other condescending term. Ngũgĩ argued that an African university should put Africa at the center of its own map, spawn with African oral traditions, start with African writers, then move outwards to the Caribbean, to African-American literature. And yes, study European literature too, but see it as one part of the world, not as the center of the universe.
So it's about shifting your perspective. It's about looking at the world from where you are actually standing, not from where your former colonizer is standing.
That's it. He called it recentering. But as you can imagine, this made him a lot of powerful enemies. He was rocking the boat in a big way.
And it wasn't long before he moved from rocking the academic boat to rocking the political boat.
And this is what leads us directly to the prison cell and the toilet paper.
Right. Section 3. So the year is now 1977. He's back in Kimirithou, his hometown, the place that was destroyed.
And he decides, with a friend, to start the Kimirithou Community Education and Cultural Center. And the first big project is to put on a play.
Ngahika Ndinda, which translates to I will marry when I want.
Now, You have to understand, this was not a play in some fancy theater in Nairobi where the elite would come and sip wine during the intermission.
No.
This was community theater in the truest, most radical sense of the word. He and the villagers literally built an open-air theater out of wood and dirt. The actors weren't professionals from the city. They were the villagers themselves.
A local people.
Peasants, factory workers, the unemployed, the people whose lives the play was about.
And the script. He didn't just hand them a script.
That's what was so revolutionary about it. It was co-written with the community. It was heavily improvised. It was organic. It changed night to night based on the audience's reaction.
And what was it about?
It dealt with their actual real-life problems. It was about land grabbing by the new black elite, the post-independence betrayal of the Mau Mau ideals, the exploitation of workers. It was their own story being told back to them in their own language, Gikuyu.
It sounds incredibly democratic, almost like a town hall meeting, but with music and drama. So why on earth did the government care about a little village play?
Because dictatorships are absolutely terrified of ordinary people talking to each other.
And realizing they have the same problems.
And realizing they have a common enemy. The president at the time was Daniel Arap Moi, a very authoritarian figure. His regime, the Can You regime, realized that this play wasn't just entertainment, it was a rehearsal for revolution.
It was empowering people.
It was empowering people to see their own reality clearly and to question it. And for a dictator, that is the most dangerous thing in the world.
So they shut it down.
Brutally. After just 6 weeks of performances, the government banned the play. They revoked the license. And then a few weeks later, on New Year's Eve, the police came for Ngũgĩ.
Can you describe the arrest?
Oh, it was classic authoritarian style. A midnight raid, police swarming his house. They turned his entire library upside down, throwing books everywhere.
Looking for what?
And this is interesting. The sources say they confiscated the script of the play, of course. But they also very specifically confiscated his personal copies of books by Marx and Lenin. They were looking for evidence of subversive thought.
They were trying to build a political case against him.
Exactly. And they took him away. He was sent to Comité Maximum Security Prison.
Without trial?
No trial, no charges, just disappeared into the system.
And Comité, as we said, is a notorious place. What were the conditions actually like for him?
It was a concrete hell.
Yeah.
He wasn't just in a regular cell, he was put in a segregated block. This block had previously been used for the mentally deranged, as they called them. Gagey joked grimly in his diary that was now being used for the politically deranged.
Whoa.
He was locked in a tiny cage for 23 hours a day. He was allowed 1 single hour of sunlight in a small yard surrounded by high walls. They took his name away from him again. He wasn't Ngũgĩ. He was just a number. Prisoner case 677.
And crucially, they denied him access to books and writing materials.
Which, for a writer, is a specific and deliberate kind of torture. It's like taking away a musician's hearing.
And this is where the legend begins. In this absolute pit of despair, he decides he's not going to be broken. He's going to write a novel.
An act of pure defiance.
But he has no paper. So walk us through the mechanics of the toilet paper. Because I think when people hear that, they imagine, a nice soft roll of Charmin.
Oh, no. This was prison-issue toilet paper in 1970s Kenya. You have to imagine the roughest, hardest, most abrasive paper possible. It came in individual sheets, not on a roll.
And it was rationed.
It was strictly rationed. You didn't just get as much as you needed. So he has to start hoarding it. He has to do this grim calculation every day. How many sheets do I actually need for, for hygiene, and how many sheets can I save for the book?
An impossible choice.
And then he has to get a pen. He somehow managed to smuggle a pen or part of pen from a sympathetic guard. The accounts vary slightly, but he secured a writing instrument.
And he's writing in a cell that is constantly being searched, right? This is incredibly risky.
That's the constant tension of the story. The guards would do these random violent sweeps. If they found a manuscript, it would be destroyed instantly, and he would be severely punished. Sent to solitary, beaten, who knows.
So where did he hide it?
He had to be clever. He would write on these small sheets, and then he would stack them, fold them, and tuck them into the most disgusting corners of the cell where he knew the guards wouldn't want to put their hands. He hid them amongst the filth.
And he's not just writing a diary or a prison memoir. He's writing Devil on the Cross. Tell us about the story itself, because you'd expect something sad and reflective, but this book is. It's wild.
It is absolutely wild. It's a surreal, magical, realist satire. The plot, if you can believe it, revolves around something called the International Competition in Modern Theft and Robbery.
A competition for thieves?
Yes. All the big shot thieves and robbers from all over the world who are really just stand-ins for corrupt politicians and capitalists, gather in a cave to boast about their crimes. They compete to see who has stolen the most from the people.
That's incredible.
One character boasts about his plan to sell air to the masses. Another wants to sell Kenyan soil in pots back to the landless peasants. It's grotesque and hilarious at the same time.
So he's taking the very people who imprisoned him, the corrupt elite, and he's turning them into these ridiculous, grotesque cartoons.
Exactly. He is laughing at them. In the darkest hole of their prison, on the very paper that's meant for human filth, he is using his intellect and his humor to mock their power. It is the ultimate act of mental and spiritual resistance.
But there is one more layer to this act of resistance, and this is arguably the most important decision he made in that cell. He's not writing this story in English.
No. This is the moment of the great switch. Up until this point, all his famous novels, Weep Not, Child, The River Between, A Grain of Wheat, were all written in English. But in that cell, he had an epiphany.
What was the realization? What changed?
He wrote about it later. He realized that by writing his stories in English, he was enriching the language of the colonizer. He was speaking to the professors in Leeds and the critics in New York, but he wasn't speaking directly to the woman who sold vegetables in the market in Kimirithou. He wasn't speaking to his own mother.
He was speaking over the heads of his own people.
And he decided, right there in the dark, that he would never write another creative work, another novel, in English. From now on, he would write in his mother tongue, Gikuyu.
That is a massive career risk. He's a world-famous English-language author. He's essentially choosing to cut off his global audience.
From a purely commercial standpoint, it was professional suicide.
Hey.
But for him, it was spiritual survival. He titled the manuscript Kaitani Mothoraba Ine, and it became the first modern novel ever written in the Gikuyu language.
So he writes the book, he survives the prison. He's finally released in December of 1978, largely due to international pressure. He's recognized as an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience, but he can't exactly go back to his old life.
No, not at all. The Moi regime was furious that he had survived, that he hadn't been broken, and that he was still defiant. They immediately blocked him from returning to his university job. His family was constantly harassed and followed.
He was a marked man.
He was. And he realized that if he stayed in Kenya, he would be killed. It was only a matter of time. So in 1982, he went into exile.
And this begins the long period of wandering. He lives in the UK, then the US. He takes up teaching positions at prestigious universities, Yale, NYU, eventually UC Irvine.
And it's during this time in exile that he writes the theoretical book that explains the decision he made in prison. He writes his manifesto, Decolonizing the Mind, published in 1986.
This is such a seminal text. If you read one nonfiction book by Ngũgĩ, this is the one to read. The central argument revolves around this idea of the memory bank.
Yes.
Can you break that down for us? What does he mean when he says a language is a memory bank?
He argues that a language isn't just a neutral tool like a hammer or a telephone that you can just pick up and use. A language, he says, carries the entire collective history, the values, the worldview of a people. When you speak a language, you are downloading a culture.
So if you lose your language,
You starve your memory bank. You cut yourself off from your own history. It's like a form of collective amnesia. He has this incredibly powerful quote in the book. The colonized trying to claim the colonizer's language is a sign of the success of enslavement.
I want to push back on that again because it's a very controversial idea. I have friends who grew up in Nairobi or Lagos or Mumbai, and they speak English as their first language. Are they enslaved? Is he saying we should all go back to speaking only indigenous languages and cut ourselves off from the world?
That is the most common criticism, and it's a fair question to ask.
Yeah.
Is he being an isolationist? Is he being an unrealistic purist? But Ngũgĩ clarified this many times later in life, especially right up to his death in 2025. He was not saying, don't learn English.
I mean, he was a master of the English language. He taught literature in it at Yale.
Exactly. His formula was what he called Mother Tongue Plus. He believed you should be rooted in your mother tongue first. That should be the foundation of your house. It should be the language of your home, your culture, your emotions. Then you can add English, you can add French, Swahili, Mandarin, whatever you want, as extra rooms to that house.
But the foundation has to be solid.
If you build the extra rooms without a solid foundation, the whole house collapses.
Yeah.
His phrase was, empowerment comes from mother tongue plus other languages. It's an additive process, not a subtractive one.
I like that. That makes a lot more sense. It's about adding to your own culture, not replacing it.
Precisely. He wanted Africans to engage with the entire world, but to do so from a position of strength, rooted in their own identity.
So he spends 22 long years in exile. He calls himself a literary migrant. And then finally, in 2002, Daniel Arap Moi retires. The dictator is gone. The political climate in Kenya changes. It's finally safe to go home.
Or so he thought. He decides to return in August of 2004. And it was supposed to be this triumphant hero's welcome. Huge crowds were expected at the airport. A month-long tour of the country was planned. He arrives with his wife, Njiri.
And then the story takes a turn that is it's heartbreaking. It's almost too cruel to be believable.
It is gut-wrenching. Just a few days after he arrives back in Nairobi, armed men break into his high-security apartment complex. And this wasn't a random burglary. They knew who he was. They assaulted Ngũgĩ. They sexually assaulted his wife in front of him. They burned his face with lit cigarettes. It was an act of extreme, calculated violence.
Oh my God. After 22 years of dreaming of home, this is the welcome he gets.
It shattered the dream. And the twist, and this is something that feels like it's straight out of a dark, tragic novel, was that when the police eventually arrested 3 suspects, one of them was his own nephew.
His nephew?
Yes, the son of his brother.
Right.
It suggests that this might have been a politically motivated hit, or maybe it was a family dispute over land that had been twisted by political forces. It's never fully clear. But it showed that the violence and the rot in the system hadn't just vanished because the old president was gone.
And yet, and this is the part that always amazes me about him, he didn't turn his back on Kenya after that.
He didn't. Most people would have fled and never, ever looked back. And who could blame them? But he continued to visit, he continued to engage, he continued to write in Gikuyu for the Kenyan people. He just refused to let the violence silence him, just like he refused to let the prison silence him.
And it wasn't just in Kenya where he faced these indignities. There's another story from 2006 in San Francisco, of all places, that really highlights the other side of his struggle, the persistent racial dynamics in the West.
The Hotel Vitale incident. This one, honestly, it just makes my blood boil every time I read about it. So here is Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. He is a distinguished professor at the University of California, Irvine. He is a perennial Nobel contender. He is a world-renowned intellectual.
He's staying at this fancy, upscale hotel in San Francisco for a conference.
Right. And an employee approaches him in the hotel lobby and just orders him to leave.
Just assumes he's a vagrant or that he doesn't belong there.
Assumes he doesn't belong. Harasses him. Tries to eject him from the premises. It was his stark, brutal reminder that he can be a literary giant in the classroom or at a lecture, but in the lobby of a fancy American hotel, to some people, he's still just a black man who is out of place.
The sources say the African diaspora and the academic community went absolutely crazy over this.
Rightfully so. It sparked this huge online debate about Professor Ngũgĩ versus the Invisible Man. Just proved his point so perfectly that colonialism and its legacies aren't just about politics or land. It's about how we see each other. It's about the power of the gaze.
Despite all this trauma, despite the racism, his literary output in the 21st century was just incredible. It's like he never slowed down. I want to talk about Wizard of the Crow.
Morogi Waka Gogo. This came out in 2006, and it is a brick of a book. It's over 700 pages long. It's this sprawling, hilarious, brilliant satire on dictatorship. It deals with a fictional ruler who gets a mysterious illness and who wants to build a tower to heaven, a literal Tower of Babel, so he can speak to God directly.
And he wrote the entire thing in Gikuyu first.
He wrote all 1,000-plus pages of the original manuscript in Gikuyu. And then, and this is the ultimate flex, he translated it into English himself. He was proving a point. He was showing the world that the Gikuyu language could handle complex, modern, satirical, magical, realist themes just as well as any European language could.
And then much later in his life, there's The Perfect Nine in 2020. This one feels different. It feels almost like a capstone to his entire career.
I think it is. It's an epic novel in verse. So it's written as poetry. And in it, he goes right back to the very beginning, to the origin myth of the Gikuyu people. The myth says that the Gikuyu people descend from the Giver Supreme, who created the father, Gikuyu, and the mother, Mumbi, and they had 9 daughters.
And usually in these kinds of myths, the focus is always on the men, the sons.
Right, the patriarchs. But Ngũgĩ, in his 80s, decides to flip the camera. He focuses the entire story on the daughters, the perfect 9. He reimagines the very foundation of his society as being matriarchal. It's a profoundly feminist retelling of his own people's genesis. He's saying our culture is valid and beautiful, but our culture also grows and evolves.
And that book made history at the International Booker Prize.
It did. In 2021, he became the first person ever to be nominated for the International Booker Prize as both the author and the translator of the same book. It was the ultimate validation of his entire philosophy.
Which brings us to the elephant that's been in the room for this entire conversation, the Nobel Prize in Literature.
The perennial bridesmaid.
Every single October, for something like 20 years, you'd see the articles, you'd see the betting odds, and everyone would say, this is the year. This has to be Ngũgĩ's year.
It became an annual ritual. I remember in 2010, the betting markets had him as the absolute hands-down favorite. It was a sure thing. Journalists were literally camped out on his lawn in California, cameras ready, just waiting for him to get the call from Sweden.
And then the Swedish Academy announced the winner was Mario Vargas Llosa.
A great writer, of course.
Yeah.
But the sense of disappointment in Kenya, across Africa, and in the literary world was just palpable. It felt like a snub. But Ngũgĩ's reaction to this, it tells you everything you need to know about the man's character.
What did he do?
He went outside to all the disappointed photographers and journalists on his lawn, and he started comforting them.
He comforted the paparazzi.
He was joking with them. He said things like, "I'm more worried about you guys standing out here in the heat all day." He completely refused to be bitter or angry. He said his real prize was his readers.
He passed away on May 28, 2025. He was 87 years old. He'd had health struggles for a while. He was a prostate cancer survivor. He'd had kidney failure.
He had a triple bypass surgery in 2019. His body was failing him in his later years, but his mind, his intellect, was sharp as a tack right until the very end.
And when he died, the tributes, as we said, they just poured in from everywhere. Will Soyinka, Barack Obama, the president of Kenya. But what struck me reading through them was that people weren't just praising his storytelling, they were praising his fight.
His fight against mental colonization. Exactly. He fundamentally changed the way a generation of African and post-colonial writers thought about their own tongues, their own cultures. And we should also mention, he literally passed the torch on. His children, T, Makoma, and Duke, Wanjiki, 4 of them are published authors.
It's a literary dynasty.
It is. He didn't just write books, he bred storytellers.
Right.
The gene continues.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to try and synthesize this incredible life. We have a boy who watches his village get burned to the ground by the empire. He masters the empire's language. He becomes its literary darling. And then he rejects it all to write on toilet paper in a cage. He was beaten, he was exiled, he was ignored by the Nobel Committee, but he never, ever stopped writing.
I think the through line, the one word that connects it all, is dignity. He believed that you cannot be a fully human, fully free person if you are viewing yourself through someone else's eyes, whether that's the colonizer's eyes or the dictator's eyes or the racist's eyes. You have to reclaim your own vision, your own language, your own way of seeing the world.
There's one final thought I want to leave our listeners with. It's a provocation that he made in an interview in 2023. People often talk about things like Kenyan English or Nigerian English or Indian English, these valid local dialects.
Oh, he hated that idea. He called it a normalized abnormality. He flat out said, Kenyan English is nonsense. He repeated his old line. The colonized trying to claim the colonizer's language is a sign of the success of enslavement.
That is a harsh thing to say. It's an uncomfortable thought.
It's meant to be uncomfortable. He's asking us a very pointed question. Why are you so comfortable with the language of power? Why do you still believe that standard English is the ultimate measure of intelligence or sophistication?
It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer, but I think that's what he did his whole life. He forced us all to ask the hard questions.
And he showed us through his own life that you can lock a man in a cell, you can give him nothing but toilet paper to wipe himself with, and he can still write a story that will be translated into 100 languages and will outlive the dictator who put him there. You cannot imprison an idea.
Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, 1938 to 2025. A life written in resistance. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.